met the dog?
Not this one.
She likes to crotch punch, so be a little.
She likes to crotch punch?
Yeah, you can see.
That'd be... Ooh! What? Hey guys, let's go down memory road. Alright guys, it's day 2. Come on over here. Come on over here. Come on over here. Hey, come on over here. Check out the map. Check out the map. Starting in Boise. We moved down to Mountain Home. And instead of continuing along, we cut down through Owyhee to Elko. And then we cut down to Eureka. And we're around here, just outside of Ely. So now today we've got Ely, and we're going to Zion. So we got about this much to go, as opposed to Ely and Zion. See my hand? And then if I rotate it, that's how much we did yesterday. So I think it's about a 2-hour difference maybe, or so.
It's day 2. It's cold. It's not too cold, but it's pretty overcast. We definitely did better than the first time. We didn't get close to hitting anyone.
I should thrift a really cool pair of pants because these ones are so dirty.
Lucy is a good horse. She never let me down. And Lucy's got a bum leg. So Tilly's gonna put it down. I ain't never been much, but I know a horse don't deserve that. So I guess I'm gonna go free.
I think these are up for auction.
See what Tommy has to say about that.
Yeah, the deer, they kind of like me. I hope I have a long and happy career with the Park Service ahead of me. Who knows how that'll go.
Yeah.
I'd love to work all over the place. I love every park I've visited or worked at for different reasons. I think they're all important. That's the watchman piece. That's what I have to count.
Oh my god.
So that looks over the campground.
So you were born in Ogden. When you were growing up, what parks did you go to? Arches, Canyonlands, and Zion?
I never went to Zion until I was like 19.
Okay.
Like right after high school was the first trip I made down here. Yeah, when I was a kid, it was like Arches was like the first national park I went to. And I came back to work there last summer. Yeah, I had never been to Zion until after high school. And like, this is the park that I kind of credit with me deciding that I want to work for the Park Service. Like Arches was special because of like how I grew up, but this is special for like the way I kind of became an adult.
I hear it.
Oh,
They're not
aren't supposed to
allowed.
have drones in the park. That's shitty.
They're long range, I bet. Let's track it down. Let's follow
Yeah,
it.
let's fucking
Let's
jump
follow
it.
I'm gonna throw a spear at it. It's called the altar of sacrifice.
That's
Yeah.
So we're taking me up there?
Looks like a pair of pants. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sabin. Happy birthday to you.
It worked. I can't believe it.
Took a couple tries. Oh.
Yay!
Talking with his hands.
All right. How's everybody doing tonight? Where are you visiting from?
Canada.
From Canada. Very cool. So you must have driven a long way. Yeah?
Nah, teleportation, dog.
Teleported. Awesome. What about you guys? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get this program started. Just to introduce myself, I am Ranger Paris. What? I'm Ranger
Penis Thompson.
I'm Ranger Pete.
You're gonna say that on accident.
I know.
You're gonna let
Just to introduce myself.
Hi,
my name
Ranger
is
Paris.
Ranger Paris. I'm proud to say this is my second season with the National Park Service. Last summer I was working on the other side of southern Utah over at Arches National Park. So really happy to be here. I'm really excited that you guys all get to experience this park as well. I think this is one of the most special places in the world. Yeah, if you have any questions just about the park in general, please feel free to come up and talk to me after the program is done. I'd be happy to talk about anything. Just some couple of safety things real quick. If you're staying in the campground, please make sure you do not leave any campfires unattended. You think that would be pretty self-explanatory, but there are reasons why we need to tell people this stuff, because people have done it before. Also, please make sure all of your food is secured in your campsite. We don't really have to worry about many things like bears here at Zion. Not much for them to eat around here. However, we do have some other very opportunistic wildlife. Our ravens and our chipmunks and our squirrels especially will love to dig into anything that you've left unsecured. So please make sure to pack all of that in your vehicle or in your trailer, what have you. All right. So name of my program is going to be Zion Through the Viewfinder. We're going to be looking at the park through the lens of art history. I'm a little bit different from some other rangers you might meet in the Park Service in that my background is a little bit less in science than a lot of them. Of course, I kind of had to study science to get this job, kind of what I went to school for. But I have a much bigger background in art. I'm very interested in those kind of more intangible elements of the national park experience. Here I'm going to do a little bit of audience participation. If that phrase instills fear in your heart, it does the same to me, so don't worry too much. It'll be pretty chill. Does everybody know how to make finger frames? What a viewfinder is? Can someone tell me what a viewfinder is? What?
It's a you look through it and it finds your view.
And it finds views. Yep, exactly. So viewfinders are usually parts of cameras. It's that little peephole at the top of the camera that you look through when you're looking to frame up your shot. So that's what we're going to be doing with this picture of the Zion Canyon here. There's nothing super special about this picture by itself. I stole it from a touring company that works out of Springdale. But what I want us to do is we're going to take our finger frames. We're going to extend them way out in front of us. Imagine this is big.
You gave me a cigarette, didn't light
Let me
it.
look through your viewfinder.
This is going to be extended way out in front of us. And what I want you guys to do, imagine you're a photographer visiting the canyon for the first time. And you're going to choose some element of this to focus on. You can only fit what's within your little viewfinder here, right? So if you can only focus on one area in this picture, go ahead and do that. I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to focus on that. If you guys wouldn't mind sharing with me what your photograph was like, I'd love to hear from you. Who focused on this cliff face right here? Looks like 2 out of the 3 did. Did anybody focus on like this tree we kind of have in the foreground here? This beautiful cottonwood tree. Got someone over there. Awesome. Did anyone happen to focus on the buildings down here in the park? Great. Or even the people walking by there on the lawn. This is a picture taken in front of the Zion Lodge. If anybody has been up there yet, has anybody been to the Zion Lodge? Awesome. Yeah, great place.
Shitty food.
Mid food.
Don't say that.
I'm just kidding. These are the oldest known photographs that I could find, at least, that we have of the Zion Canyon. These were taken by a man named Charles R. Savage, which is a pretty sick name, who journeyed into the canyon around 1870, and he took these photos for use in advertising for the Union Pacific Railroad Company. So the first known photographs that we have of the Zion Canyon, and I think this was kind of important to show, because think of the time that this photograph was taken. This is way back in 1870. This is back when, you know, camera equipment was huge. It took a lot of time and a lot of patience to take a photograph. Whereas nowadays, when we go into the canyon, we can take, you know, more photographs in here per day than might have been taken in an entire year in 1870. So, and these are some other old photographs. This is the Court of the Patriarchs right here, also taken in 1870 by the same guy. And then some other really old photos by John Cahillers, who accompanied the John Wesley Powell expedition to kind of chart this area in 1872. So I think this is the beginning of a very long-standing tradition in our national parks of photography and art. I think the arts are very inherently tied to the national park experience, although it's something that doesn't get talked about quite as much. And I think photographs and paintings are a big reason why people come visit these places in the first place. Before any of you guys had visited Zion National Park, had you seen a picture of it before? Yeah? You didn't know anything about it?
No, I wasn't blind. It's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great way to experience the parks, but kind of rare in today's age, right? Most of us have seen, you know, a bajillion pictures of Angel's Landing before, you know, we ever even came to Utah for the first time. So photographs, this kind of visual media is really important for park tourism, and it's a really kind of ingrained part of our history here. What can we learn about perspective through art? I think everybody that visits the national parks kind of comes at it from a different angle. We all come from our own unique experiences. Some of us are really used to recreating outside. For some of us, this might be our first national park ever, and a whole spectrum of everything in between. So we each come at it from our own angle. I'll be talking a lot about perspectives today and kind of trying to break down our art history through the lens of three perspectives. I'm going to talk about Zion as a wilderness area, Zion as a home, and then lastly, Zion as a national park, kind of that most recent part of our history out here. Starting out with Zion as wilderness. I have this quote here by a guy named Frederick Dellenbaugh. It says, "The world here seems still in the making, and humanity scarcely sheltered from the blows of nature's sledge." So kind of a dramatic quote there, but I do think it kind of reflects the mentality of the time. Frederick Dellenbaugh was a painter and photographer who also was on the John Wesley Powell expedition to kind of first chart out this area. And you'll see reflected in a lot of his work and a lot of his contemporaries this kind of concept of the American West as this very wild, kind of untouched place, right? This right here is a very famous painting here at Arches. It's called Zion Canyon, painted in 1904 by Frederick Dellenbaugh, the gentleman who wrote the quote on the last slide there. We love this painting here at Zion because this is pretty much, to a lot of people, the reason why we became a national park in the first place. Here we have a great view. This is the Parouche Trail right here. Has anybody been on the Parouche Trail since your visit? Yep, that nice paved bike path right there. Super modern. This is what it looked like back in 1904. So just kind of... Dellenbaugh painted this. He had it displayed at the World's Fair in St. Louis that same year. And so this was kind of the first time that the scenery that we had here in the Zion Canyon was put before the eyes of the majority of the American public in kind of urban areas. So this crossed the eyes of a lot of people. Word of mouth had eventually kind of worked its way up, and that eventually led, at least to a lot of historians, to Mukuntuweap National Monument being founded. And that was all because of this oil painting by Frederick Dellenbaugh. Here we have another painting kind of in the same school. This is by Thomas Moran. This one's really interesting. It's called The Valley of Babbling Waters. What you might notice about this, you know, if you're familiar with Zion and its cliff features, is that this looks very much kind of like Zion, but it's not really Zion. A lot of these features, if you looked around for them, you couldn't quite find here in the park. It suggests the features of Zion National Park. It kind of captures the same kind of aesthetic that we see out here, but it's not a one-to-one. Thomas Moran said in interviews later in his life that he didn't care at all about capturing the accuracy of the landscapes he was painting. He worried more about conveying the feeling that these landscapes evoked in a person. In person, these paintings are like 5 or 6 feet tall. They're huge, they took a really long time to work on, and very, very detailed. Here's another painting kind of in that same school. This is by Howard Russell Butler, a little bit later in 1926. Again, that kind of same very romantic kind of view of the wilderness here. We see very, very little sign of any human habitation, except for these couple of cowboys here on horseback, just about to enter the Narrows. We also have the long-standing tradition of photography that ties into park history too. This gentleman on the left here is a guy named Ansel Adams. If anyone has been to Yosemite National Park, you've probably heard his name. He was a very, very influential landscape photographer from the mid-20th century. He was very, very influential on just the world of landscape photography in general, not just the national parks. Here are some pictures he took right here at Zion. This is a Court of the Patriarchs right here, which you guys can see at shuttle stop 4 if you get off there. There's a whole museum dedicated to Ansel Adams over in Yosemite. That's pretty cool to check out. And then here I'm showing some photographs that were much, much later. This was taken in 2017, but inspired by that same school of photography. This is by Jody Holden, called Mountain Walking. One thing that I think this captures really well, there's a concept in art history that some people refer to as the sublime. This is a very kind of like highbrow philosophical concept in the 20th century. But the sublime refers to basically like an overwhelming sense of emotion in response to like a natural landscape or an idea even. So it's this kind of sense of awe, this sense of wonder, the sense of newness that's so overwhelming at points that it kind of crosses over into fear. And I think some of these photographs can convey that pretty well. Here we have one of our cliff faces shrouded in clouds. We're seeing our cliff structures really well there, and I think this does a good job of conveying that sense of just overwhelming wilderness. Like, we feel so small in comparison to these cliff faces around us. Another photograph here that kind of captures that as well by Rick Braveheart. This is called The Dreamscape, and it feels pretty dreamy, right? We have these two kind of arms of the cliffs reaching out with tufts of cloud in between kind of separating them. This seems like a very kind of otherworldly image. It seems a lot bigger than us in a way that can feel kind of intimidating. I'm going to ask you guys another question. So I showed you all these paintings and photographs that conveyed Zion as wilderness. What do you think is missing from them? What's a part of the Zion National Park experience nowadays that we can't escape no matter where we go in the park, and also happens to be something that's missing in a lot of these?
Tourists.
Tourists, yep. People, right? People. So whether we like it or not, people are very much a part of the national park story nowadays. It's quite difficult to get a picture of a lot of these famous features without having people in them, unless you're taking them at some crazy angle right from the base. I think it's kind of interesting to get into a conversation about the way we consider wilderness. I think to kind of a modern, kind of like Western perspective, we think of wilderness as something entirely separate from the human kind of sphere, right? We kind of define it as something inherently absent from human presence. But I think if you look far enough back in our history, you'll find that's not quite true. People have inhabited this landscape for thousands and thousands of years, and people have ingrained themselves into its ecosystems in ways that are maybe a little bit hard for us to grasp nowadays. That brings me to my second kind of a point here, our second perspective, which is Zion as home. So like I said, this area has been home to people for thousands and thousands of years, and that originated with our indigenous populations. That began with the ancestral Puebloan and the Fremont peoples that moved through this area. In the modern day, the modern descendants we have of those people are the Paiute out here in southern Utah. These are the tribes most directly associated with the landscape that we find ourselves in right now. We have the Seal the Kaibab band of Paiutes. They live in northern Arizona. And then the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah. This is a confederation of 5 bands, the Cedar, Indian Peaks, Kanash, Kusharim, and Shivwits people that all live out here in southern Utah. And these are the people that have called this area home for long before, any kind of white settler came along and built their homes. And they live behind some signs of art as well. Here are 2 pictures of very, very old pottery pieces dating back to 1100, somewhere between 1100 and 1225 AD. So these are quite old, and they're considered part of the North Creek style of pottery. So We find pottery throughout this area left behind by those indigenous peoples, where the clay was gray and it was painted on with this black pigment, these kind of decorative designs here. We can confidently say that that was art because it served mostly a decorative purpose, right? It wasn't necessarily practical. They did it because they could and because it looked nice. So we have these people leaving behind art as they traveled through this area and as they established homes in this area for thousands of years. But the tradition didn't stop there. We still have indigenous artistic traditions continuing into the modern day. This right here is a picture of a woman named Fawn Douglas, who's a current member of the Las Vegas Paiute tribe. Here she's seen working on a mural, and this is her in front of some displays she had up at the Museum of Fine Arts in Las Vegas. So she's carrying on a lot of those kind of old traditions in art. And tying in the indigenous experience and indigenous practices into her work as well. She's a really cool kind of a multimedia artist. She's done all kinds of stuff, murals, performance art, kind of spanning the whole spectrum. I'm still kind of working on getting permissions to display more of that directly in my program, but hopefully by later in the season I'll have some of that. These are some other, this right here on the left is a good example of a modern artist, a modern indigenous artist who's working with the parks. This was an art piece created for the centennial celebration of Pipe Spring National Monument over in Arizona. That's a couple hours from where we are right now. It's a historical site. There's a fort built by Mormon pioneers there. And of course, long before that, it was inhabited by the Paiute people. So in their interpretation up there, they make sure to talk pretty equally about like the indigenous history and the settler history, just so we can kind of get a full picture of what happened over at Pipe Spring. Really great place, and most of their interpreters are indigenous because it's located in the Paiute, the Southern Utah Paiute Reservation. So really good resource if anyone is curious about learning more of our indigenous history of the area. We're talking about rock markings. So has anybody seen pictures of our petroglyphs? Maybe not here, but like other parts of Southern Utah. These are really cool. If anyone wasn't aware, petroglyphs are markings that were carved into rocks. So they're permanent features that were carved in using tools of some kind, chipping away at the surface of our sandstone. A pictograph, by contrast, is something painted on with pigment. So natural pigments made of plants were painted onto the surface of rocks. That's how you can kind of tell the difference there. None of these are hieroglyphics. We hear that come up a lot too. Hieroglyphics are like what you would find in ancient Egypt, where it's an actual sequential like system of writing. These, at least as far as we know in the modern day, weren't really portraying anything like that. One important thing that we do need to note about these kind of ancient indigenous rock markings is that we're trying to move away from referring to them as art. And you might ask why. It's a good question, because a lot of literature has referred to these as rock art for a long time. The reason why is because art is a very kind of modern and kind of, European-centric perception of things. We think of art as a piece that was created with the kind of explicit intent of eliciting emotional reactions from people. Its value is largely aesthetic, right? It's largely decorative. That's not necessarily what these were. These weren't just decorations. For a lot of people, these were a means of communication between groups. These were a means of recording their own history. They didn't hold that kind of purely aesthetic value that we tend to associate with art. And a lot of descendants of these indigenous groups will point out that they don't have a word for art in their language. That's just not really the way they think about it, right? We tend to think of art, again, as kind of this separate sphere from kind of mainstream society that people choose to engage with. Whereas for a lot of these people, these rock markings were just kind of a natural extension of their lifestyle. So, at least in the Park Service, we're trying to move away from referring to these as rock art, and instead trying to use terms like what they are specifically, like petroglyphs or pictographs, or rock markings is a pretty good catch-all term for that. So I will not be attempting to interpret what any of these symbols mean. I know a lot of people are kind of curious as to what do these mean? What person is that? What kinds of animals are being displayed here? It's not really my place to try to interpret that. No matter who you ask, it's always best to kind of defer to actual descendants of these indigenous peoples for those interpretations. It's also important to remember that those interpretations can vary a lot between tribes and between individuals as well. So, something to be very mindful of when we talk about these. Moving on, Much later, much after the indigenous presence in the area, we had the presence of white settlers, of Mormons moving into the area. Over here on the left, we have a very early picture of the Heaps family. If anyone has done the Emerald Pools hike, their homestead was right up there, long before there was, you know, of course, like a hiking trail that took you up to it. So that's a picture of the Heaps family right here. And then over here, I think this picture is really amusing. This is a picture of Springdale, Utah in 1870. So the town you guys are probably stopped in and maybe had dinner in and maybe bought beer in on your way up here. This is what it looked like in 1870. From what I can tell, I can see one building and like 3 trees over here and a couple of horses walking around. So just to give you a sense of how much this area has changed in the past, 100+ years, right? Here we have a modern art piece by one of our own artists in residence here in the park. Leslie Nichols is the name of the artist, and the piece is titled Vicky Parkinson. This is a portrait of a person composed by typewritten letters on a page. Vicky Parkinson, the woman being portrayed here, is her family has long lived in this area. She was a descendant of the original Mormon pioneers that came in here and decided to settle. And the letters being used to create the portrait are excerpts from the journal of some of her descendants that came in. So if you look closely, you'll see, they're detailing the things they ate, the things they saw during their wagon trip out west. Kind of interesting. I think this is a really cool concept for an art piece as well. So she's part of a kind of many generation long presence in the Zion Canyon. Of course, too, the national park isn't just home to people. What else is it home to?
Animals.
Animals, yeah. This is a really beautiful art piece here by Zoe Keller, which was another one of our artists in residence that came by in 2018. Here we have a really beautiful display of a lot of our kind of famous wildlife out here. Yeah. It is really nice to have a bike working here. It's such a bike friendly park. You can commute around.
I'm scared that you'll hate it, but it's all that I've got left. Don't worry about it, baby. Someday we'll be in heaven. I've been losing sight lately, but baby,
Cactus is cacti. Cacti.
There's another one of those J's, I think.
I can't seem to shake it. Don't let it rise above. Homesick and wasted. I climb up just to fall.
So it's I think during the daytime you get upwind, and at the end of the day it's down canyon wind. And it can get really intense because it's all being funneled into
The mountain breathes. Can you hear it?
Let's go.
Canyon run. Desert tours.
Baby, is this a day?
What's all about?
I was torn up, don't say you would. I
It's there.
There's no water.
Just put it somewhere. It's
like
I'm
40
just waiting to
skips,
say, I'll
dude.
come back.
When it rains, it rocks.
I just wanna make it, but I'm tired.
My tummy's really full.
My personal favorite is the desert tortoise, which won't surprise anybody that knows me. Down here at the bottom, we have the skull of a bighorn sheep, we have a peregrine falcon, we have a Mexican spotted owl up there. This is really good kind of diorama of some of our most popular animal species. Moving on to my third perspective here, my kind of third and final one, Zion is a national park. So again, long after indigenous presence and long after the pioneers kind of settled in this area, the federal government came along and established this area as Mukuntuweap National Monument in 1909. Yeah, that was interesting because that was before the National Park Service existed. So originally those parks before the NPS were managed by like the U.S. Army, so very different experience than we get nowadays, right? The NPS was founded in 1916. It was the first time an agency was kind of established explicitly to protect and enforce regulations around these kinds of natural spaces that we were trying to protect. Later on in 1919, the park was expanded. They added Kolob Canyon up there in the northwestern corner of the park, and the whole thing was renamed to Zion National Park again in 1919. So real quick rundown of our history as a park there. When people think of art in the national parks, I think a lot of people think of posters like this. You can find these in pretty much every national park gift shop. If not these exact prints, then artwork that was very much inspired by this style. These were the known as the See America posters. In the 1930s, around the time of the Great Depression, a lot of people were traveling because they had no money. So the federal government saw a need to kind of encourage tourism and to encourage people to travel around and kind of stimulate those local economies. And one of the ways they did that was through art. They hired visual artists to create these posters. They displayed them in big urban centers. And again, for a lot of people, this was kind of their first time seeing some of the scenery we had out here. And it encouraged them to travel. So posters like this is a really famous one here at the park. Ranger Naturalist Service, Zion National Park, Department of the Interior. Again, you can find this exact print in our gift shop, and if not, you can find something heavily inspired by it. What's up?
What is that depicting?
I believe this is depicting a cliff we have here in the park called the Great White Throne. That's good, because I'll actually have to double check to make sure I know what that is. But I think this is the Great White Throne right here, which you can see at the Big Bend shuttle stop if you get out there. Sweet. And then we have postcards. This is how people kind of communicated and sent updates on their trips back home. So postcards were a big deal. We got some really nice hand-painted ones here that I found in our archives from the 20s and 30s. We also have our brochures. A lot of people love to collect our little fold-up maps. Does anybody know what those are called? So you know what to ask the next ranger when you're begging them for one? They're called unigrids. A lot of rangers will like to be cheeky about it. If you just say you want a map, they'll give you something else, and then you'll be like, that's not the one I wanted. I wanted the shiny one. The shiny map you're thinking of is called a unigrid, and that's going to be this guy right here. So this gives you a nice kind of topographic view of the park, and also some really nicely designed stuff on the back that gives you more detailed information about our ecology. I do believe that unigrids are an art form. There's a reason why so many people like to collect them. They're very much a part of the National Park Service's brand. To contrast that, over on the left here, we have a historic example of a park brochure from 1926. I just think that's cool to see. I was digging through the archives a lot, and there was some stuff where I'm like, I don't know exactly how I'm going to talk about it, but I want people to see it anyway. So that's an example of our park brochure from 1926 as well. So you were handed this today when you came in the park by the ranger at the entrance station. This is what you would have been handed if you were visiting in 1926. Also beginning way back then with the conception of Zion National Park, artists that were visitors, like you guys, came along and started composing art pieces as well. This is a pretty famous example. Mary Russell Farrell Cotton, name is kind of a mouthful, came in and composed some pretty famous paintings of the park here. This one was from 1930. taken from a observation point, I think is where she painted that from. This is one of my favorite examples, a woman named Isadora Montague, who was a university student who was attending, I want to say, the University of Utah up in Salt Lake. That's also something we'll have to verify. She was known for being a bit of a daredevil. She would visit our national parks and paint from the kind of scariest locations imaginable. So here she's actually suspended on ropes. I want to say probably also around the Big Bend area. That's a popular climbing route nowadays. She's suspended sitting on a rope swing, dangling off of a cliff, painting the canyon walls on the opposite side. So this is way back in 1920. We also, of course, have our Artist in Residence program. So this is a program that a lot of the bigger national parks in the system have created that facilitates opportunities for artists of all kinds of disciplines, and we'll talk about a bit of those later, to live in the national park for a span of a couple of weeks or a couple of months in some cases, and they can create plein air art pieces inspired by the landscapes around them. At the end of that, they usually choose at least a couple of art pieces to donate to the park to be displayed in our museums and in our archives. So I think this is really cool. It's carrying on a tradition that goes back to the early days of the Park Service. John Fairbanks here was our first artist in residence in the 20s. And over here is Kathy Hodge painting in almost the same location in 2023. So long-standing tradition in the National Park Service, and I think it's really cool for integrating the arts more closely into the national park experience. These are some interesting examples of our past artists in residence. Like I said, we get artists of all disciplines to come in and create art pieces inspired by this place. Just a couple, we have Jason Gray, who was a poet. David Purcell was a sculptor. Sylvia Friday was our most recent one. She was a basket weaver. These are some other examples here. John Roach was a soundscape artist and experimental musician. So I was watching a little mini documentary about his work, which was really fascinating. He traveled to different locales throughout the park, recorded the soundscapes there. He met with some of our cultural resource advisors with the Kaibab Paiute tribe. They recorded some songs for him and recorded a bit of their language for him to use in his projects. And he basically ended up composing a narrated tour for like our shuttle bus with these soundscapes, which I thought was really cool, and it's something you can listen to on the website. Also in the music vein, we have Rachel Panich right here. She's a classical musician, considered a composer in residence. So she also lived right here in the park and composed a few music pieces on violin, inspired by different locations like Menu Falls. Then Simon Arizpe right here, another really unique example. He's a pop-up book artist. I don't know how far he got with this or if he finished it or where you can find the final product, but his goal was to make a pop-up book version of every single kind of major geological feature in the canyon. So really cool. All right, so kind of getting towards our wrap up here. What inspires you guys about Zion? Imagine you're looking at the park not as the lens of just, an average everyday visitor or a scientist, but through the lens of an artist. When you look around you, what about this landscape do you find so inspiring? This park.
Me, colors.
The colors? Yeah, the color palette is very nice. I give a very similar program to this over at Arches. And I talked about the color wheel. Over there, kind of the main colors that we had were orange and blue. Where are orange and blue on the color wheel? Opposite, right?
Complementary.
The complementary, yeah. That's a color combination that's very naturally pleasing to the eye. We have some of that out here too. If you look right up here, kind of our rusty red sandstone contrasted against those kind of big, wide open blue skies. It's a very naturally pleasing color combination. So our colors are very striking out here. Anybody else want to share what people find inspiring? Right?
There's a reason people believe in God.
Right, yeah.
You're like looking at you're just like, that's a big rock.
Right.
Water did that?
Yeah, right. It's like the scale is very striking, and it's something that's hard to capture in a photograph and even in a painting, right? It's kind of hard to get that sense of scale across. Well, thank you all for sharing. These are the things I want you guys to think about as you're exploring not just Zion, but pretty much any national park you visit. I encourage you guys to kind of engage with these resources a bit more intentionally. Don't just take a quick picture of stuff and then leave. Take a moment to maybe ask yourself, what about this place inspires me? What does this place mean to me? But yeah, like I said, make sure to take the time when you're exploring these places to engage with them a little bit more intentionally. Don't just take really quick pictures and, check it off your list and then leave. Ask yourself questions like, what inspires me about this place? What does this place mean to me, and what does it mean to the people that came here before I did? You know, I think that's a good way to kind of develop a closer relationship to your national parks and hopefully get a bit more out of your experience as well. So think about the role that the visual arts have played in your visit. Where do you point the lens? That's kind of the big question I like to ask. What can we learn from where someone decides to point their camera when they visit a national park? Thank you guys. That's all I have. Thank you.
That's my boy.
Okay.
Great.
It's Monday morning. Everyone's leaving, including us. Hey, dog. By the way, he's not in uniform. What is he doing? What is he doing? You're not in uniform. Not yet.
I don't go into it. Yeah.
I love how it feels like a land with no wood. Like nothing has happened yet, but that anything could. There's a road that you took to get here. It goes into nothing. There are mountains glazed with the sky ahead that you're yet to reach. There are empty campsites to be filled with new people. And sometimes the sun casts its light on a new area, showing you something new to be grateful for.